John Weever was an English antiquary and poet. He is best known for his work Ancient Funeral Monuments, the first full-length book to be dedicated to the topic of English church monuments and epitaphs, which was published in 1631, the year before his death. Life. Weever was a native of Preston, Lancashire. Little is known of his early life, and his parentage is not certain. He may be the son of the John Weever who in 1590 was one of 13 followers of local landowner Thomas Langton put on trial for murder after a riot which took place at Lea Hall, Lancashire. He was educated at Queen's College, Cambridge, where he was admitted as a sizar on the 30th of April 1594. Weever's first tutor at Cambridge was William Covell, himself a native of Lancashire and author of Parliamentaire, which contains one of the first printed notices of Shakespeare. Another of Weever's tutors was Robert Pearson, whom in later life he mentions with gratitude as a reverend, learned divine. It is possible that Weever considered a career in the church himself, but after receiving his degree on the 16th of April 1598, he appears to have left Cambridge and travelled to London, where he immersed himself in the literary scene. In late 1599 he published epigrams in the oldest cut and newest fashion, containing epigrams on Shakespeare, Samuel Daniel, Michael Drayton, Ben Jonson, Edmund Spenser, William Warner and Christopher Middleton, all of which are valuable to the literary historian. The epigram on Shakespeare is particularly interesting since it follows the typical Shakespearean sonnet form. This may indicate Weever had seen actual examples of Shakespeare's sonnets, which at this date circulated only in manuscript. Many other epigrams, however, relate to persons Weever knew at Cambridge and presumably were composed while he was still a student there. The book also has commendatory verses by some of Weever's Cambridge friends. Weever was in York in 1603 and later apparently in Lancashire. Eventually, however, he settled in London and married, buying a house in the parish of St. James, Clerkenwell. Works. In 1600 Weever published Faunus and Melliflora, which begins as an erotic poem in the style of Shakespeare's Venus and Adonis, and after 1,000 lines in this vein abruptly veers towards satire, with a description of the mythological origins of the form and translations of satires by classical authors. It concludes with references to contemporary satirists Joseph Hall and John Marston, and also to the Bishop's Ban of 1599, which ordered the calling in and destruction of satirical works by Thomas Nash and others. In 1601 an anonymous pamphlet called The Whippinge of the Satyr was published, which attacks three figures referred to as the epigrammatist, the satirist and the humorist. These three are taken to refer to the contemporary writers Everard Gilpin, author of Skilletheia, or A Shadow of Truth, his kinsmen John Marston and Ben Jonson. It has been convincingly argued that Weever was the author of this pamphlet, and that as a result he was attacked in his turn and lampooned on stage as the character Asinius Bubo in Thomas Dekker's Satyromastix, as Simplicius Faber in Marston's What You Will, and his shift in Jonson's Every Man Out of His Humour. All these three characters are represented as being very small in stature and great lovers of tobacco, two characteristics which Weever himself admits to in his later works. In 1601 Weever also published two more serious works of a religious tone, The Mirror of Martyrs and An Agnus Dei, The Mirror of Martyrs of the Life and Death of ... Sir John Oldcastle may have been part of a backlash. In his preface Weever calls it the first true Oldcastle, perhaps on account of the fact that Shakespeare's character Falstaff first appeared as Sir John Oldcastle. Weever's work is influenced by John Bale's 1544 biography of Oldcastle, which presents him as a proto-Protestant martyr. In the fourth stanza of this long poem, in which Sir John as his own panegyrist, occurs a reminiscence of Shakespeare's Julius Caesar which serves to fix the date of the play. Weever's other work of this year, An Agnus Dei, is the life of Christ told in verse form. It has little literary merit but went through several editions, perhaps because it was produced as a tiny book less than 2 inches square. The Mirror of Martyrs was reprinted in 1872 for the Roxburgh Club. Ancient Funeral Monuments. As early as his first publication in 1599, Weever had demonstrated an interest in tomb monuments. Developing this, he spent the first 3 decades of the 17th century collecting monumental inscriptions. He traveled throughout England and to parts of Scotland, France, the Low Countries and Italy. Back in England he made friends among the chief antiquaries of his time, including Sir Robert Cotton and the herald Augustin Vincent. The result of his endeavours appeared as Ancient Funeral Monuments, a folio volume published in 1631. The work included a lengthy introductory global overview of his subject, the Discourse of Funeral Monuments, and this was followed by a survey of over 1,000 inscriptions in the 4 southeastern dioceses of England: Canterbury, Rochester, London and Norwich. The book is particularly valuable on account of the subsequent loss of many of these inscriptions. Weever was far less interested in the sculptural or architectural aspects of monuments. He did not make drawings on his travels, and the published volume contains just 18 illustrative woodcuts, all of which appear to have been added only at the production stage, and to have been based on drawings supplied by antiquarian friends. The Society of Antiquaries holds 2 notebooks in Weever's own hand which contain a partial early draft of Ancient Funeral Monuments, as well as other material not included in the published volume. Death and commemoration. Weever died between mid-February and late March 1632, and was buried at St. James, Clerkenwell. His own funeral monument has since been destroyed, but a copy of the verses on it survives in the 1633 edition of John Stow's Survey of London. The engraved frontispiece to Ancient Funeral Monuments includes a portrait of Weever, giving his age as 55, and also the following doggerel summary of his life, personal life. Weever's wife's first name was Anne, but it is unclear from the surviving records whether she was Anne Edwards, who married a man named John Weever in St. James Church, Clerkenwell, in 1614, and Panting, who married a John Weever in the same church in 1617, or neither of these.